to the Renegade Report. I'm Jonathan.
And Ramon is present. And Jonathan, it is EFF Red Friday.
Very excited, Ramon. As you can see, I'm not wearing red.
Neither am I. I don't have red clothes.
No, I generally avoid communist colours.
Yeah, so, and I don't own overalls because I don't work that hard. But yes, I mean, so Julius came out during the course of this week or last week where he said, black South Africans will be free once they can hire white domestic workers.
Of course they will.
Which is a curious thing to say because he's basically a white supremacist.
Yes, we'll only be free once we've subjugated the white people.
Well, no, he's inferring that white people are superior because they are not domestic workers.
Well, and there are white domestic workers, of course.
Yeah, all over the world, as far as I'm aware. But importantly, he had a tweet, when was it? Last year, where he says, for the first time in my life, I will not stand down for white people. I feel like I'm equal to them. So this man has a real inferiority complex.
Yeah, I was going to say his insecurities. But look, I mean, his insecurities have driven his entire party. It's essentially a political party dedicated to the insecurities of Julius Malema.
Right, and it's an ideology of victimhood at the end of the day, which is very popular these days. Thanks to Jussie Smollett and.
Well, Julius is quite a victim. I mean, he had a tough upbringing. No dad, I think. Not much of a family life, as far as I understand, and. Just not a very clever kid. Couldn't pass matric. Really.
Yeah, but think about it. So no real family, so to speak. Goes to the ANC, that becomes his family. That becomes his cult.
And Jacob, his daddy.
And then the ANC tell him, well, you're causing shit, so out you go. And now all he wants to do is get back in. And he's doing whatever he can, acting out like a petulant toddler to get back in. So, and this man is probably the most effective political leader in South Africa at the moment, I would argue.
Oh, yeah, messaging. He's brilliant at messaging.
But he's still a broken person. So what does that say about the other political parties that are less effective?
Well, they're certainly very poor at dealing with, as you say, an individual who's a broken person and they can't seem to overcome him. Yeah,
because I think we can easily... what is it? Kill shots. Yes. Scott Adams talks about kill shots, linguistic kill shots. And Donald Trump calls people like Crooked Hillary.
Yeah.
Like it works really well at a psychological level.
Yeah.
But no one has done that to him on a psychological level. Maybe we should try.
Well, we can certainly try. I don't think any of our political parties will. I think that's unlikely to happen. They all seem to be quite cordial with each other most of the time. Occasionally, you'll get someone like John Steenhuisen saying something a little bit biting in Parliament. But
he called them Teletubbies once, which was funny. And the EFF got really offended.
Yes, that was a linguistic kill shot, but more of that.
Absolutely. Grow some balls. Political parties become like us. We're popular.
Well, do you want to introduce our guest?
Talking about politics.
Since we have a politician in studio.
So he's gone to the dark side.
I think he might not appreciate that description.
No, so he's gone to the dark side. He's becoming a politician or has become one. But Rob Hutchinson joins us this week, who has many, many years of civil activism under his banner and now Deputy Secretary of COPE and co-founder of OUTA. Welcome, Rob.
Hi, Ramon. Thanks for having me.
No, it's good to have you on here. So, and a lot of people don't know you that well. Like, I only know you because a friend of mine knows you, and he said, Rob's a good guy to chat to. So, let's talk a little bit about your civil activism. Like, what makes you think civil society has such an important role to play in a so-called liberal democracy like ours?
Well, it's an interesting question. Civil society holds all the power, as far as I'm concerned. Politicians are just there to supposedly be civil servants, although they seem to be taking the more of an authoritarian role lately. But ultimately, the civil society holds the power to make the decisions, to influence the way policy is supposed to go, and pay the taxes which pay the salaries of the politicians. So if you don't please civil society, then you're on the losing side instantly.
Well, that may be true as a theory, but in South Africa, we've certainly haven't seen that as the reality on the ground. We've had civil servants, well, I would argue since the establishment of this state, as a republic, who believe that they know better. They are certainly not representatives of their communities. Most people don't even know who their representative is in Parliament. And they think they know better, usually. They seem to think civil servant refers to, getting a nice house, car, and a good salary, and telling people on Twitter that they're racist. And that's really their role in life, and they'll tell you better. And so civil society is often, while you say they have the power, I think they should have the power, but they certainly are ignored most of the time.
Yeah, well, I think it's because civil society doesn't realize that they have the power, first of all. We're stuck in the whole mindset of traditional leaders who are supposed to guide us. And the problem becomes where people can't separate the party from the state. And it becomes almost a religious belief that I have to follow this party and they're there to guide me. Whereas they don't understand democracy in the true sense it's supposed to be. Whereas we have the power as civil society. You will follow us. I hate the phrase that people use where we have leaders, because they're not leaders. I'm not a leader. I'm just there to serve the public, but the public needs to understand that and realize that. Realize is that a word? But that's what they need to do. They need to understand. Go back to what we used to believe and say, this is how it's supposed to be. You're not there to lead us as a government. I need to understand what a government is. It's not to rule over people in any way whatsoever. It's to just set laws that guide people in a relaxed way, if that makes any sense at all. Yeah.
Well, yes, but I used to believe that. And then with absolute respect, and then I grew up to be like an adult, and I could see that the state is just an institution of theft and coercion. It's a monarchy, except that you're able to vote once in a while, and that makes it legitimate. The legitimacy of the state, it has a lot of resources to reinforce that legitimacy through PR, through coercion, through taxation, through theft. So, I accept that, but is there anywhere in the world where you would think that a state is actually a representative for the people it supposedly serves? Because I don't know if that exists in a real sense.
No. Well, I think it all starts off with good intentions, but unfortunately, positions of power attract corrupt people, and the narcissistic type or the pathological or psychological type will be attracted to that and try and rule over people instead of serving them. That old saying that ultimate power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, is unfortunately very true. Once you're in a position of power and you are exposed to all the means and money and everything else necessary, it becomes too easy to actually abuse that position of power. And what happens in civil society is we tend to elect leaders and then just step back and expect them to lead us, and we don't get involved in how we should do. In the proper decision making processes and everything else that needs to happen, and that's a fault. So we step back, expect them to carry on as they are, guide us in the way that they think we should be guided, and we just accept it. And before we know it, we're too far down that line to actually be able to make a difference.
I think most people, though, want to just live their lives. We've made this point on the show many times before. They just want to get on with it. They want to live their lives, do what's important to them, get involved in the things they're interested in and not get involved in the things they're not interested in. Most South Africans, most citizens anywhere in the world, are not really interested in building roads. They're not particularly interested in where the power lines go. They just know they want power, but they don't care what they traverse. And a million other examples. So they sort of elect someone who they assume will decide what roads need to be built, when, where the electricity power lines run, when, where, how the water is dealt with, all these basic sort of services. And that's what they kind of expect of their government. And so they go to the polls, the responsible citizen, so to speak. So, Ramon's not responsible at all, but the responsible citizen goes to the polls.
Highly irresponsible.
There you go. The responsible citizen, so to speak, goes to the polls, once every 4 or 5 years, depending on the country, and then they vote, and then they think that problem is now solved, okay? And they then let these people take over and do what they do. The reality is that they don't then actually decide on the roads and the power lines and all that stuff. They may along the way, but they end up enacting weird and wonderful legislation. This is the problem with legislators; they legislate, and so you end up with this massive sort of governmental system, which actually, if you ask most people if they wanted a lot of the laws that get passed, they'd be like, why do we need a law for that? Why do we need 1,000 pages describing how you recycle plastic?
Absolutely. But when you've got to sort of balance the laws between those that protect the state and those that protect the people. And as we drift towards a more totalitarian state, you see more laws that are brought about to protect the state and at the expense of the people. People just sort of become there to fund the state through the taxes. And again, I think it's because people don't get involved enough, and they make those assumptions that all governments are good. They're there to do after my best interest, and that's terrible.
Yeah.
They're not at the end of the day, and I shouldn't possibly not be saying that. But governments tend to drift towards a totalitarian state or mindset, no matter what happens, because as society becomes more unruly or more aware, the mere fact that civil society vastly outnumbers government has to instill more and more controlling laws to protect themselves from an uprising that might happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, based on real life examples, the differences that people look at between Maduro and Macron. So Maduro, Venezuela, a horrible dictator, terrible. He's cutting off aid and shooting people in the streets, and it's terrible. Macron and the Gilets jaunes protest, sort of the same thing. They just pass a law that sort of really dilutes the right to protest in France based on the Gilets jaunes protesters. And the Gilets jaunes have blinded hundreds of people by shooting people in the eye with rubber bullets and breaking bones of like...
You talk about the police have blinded hundreds of people.
Yeah. The police in France have utterly decimated some of these protesters using methods that are, it's pure assault. It's assault GBH. People could get killed. I don't know if anyone has been killed as yet.
No.
But in terms of principle, it is the same thing. Except Maduro is not seen as legitimate, whereas Macron is seen as legitimate. But as soon as there's an uprising, the state has all these resources and power to quell that sort of uprising. But if the state goes against you, you're fucked. You're really screwed. That asymmetry is a real problem.
But that's exactly how it happens, because you start off with sort of laws that are balanced, whereas the people and the state have the same sort of same power. But eventually it becomes more totalitarian, as I was saying before. And then it leads to that situation where people feel oppressed because there are just too many laws. And people who are oppressed are always going to fight back at some stage. And it just starts with 1 or 2 or 3. And eventually it's a snowball effect where there's people are attempting to overthrow the state. And perhaps legitimately too.
Well, what do you think of the argument now against populism? So populism is the sort of one of the buzzwords of the past couple of years. People argue that Trump happened because of populism, Brexit happened because of populism, certain elections in Europe have happened because of populism. They're using that as a negative term. But what I'm hearing is you have governments who over decades have abused the populace and abused the trust placed in them by the populace. And so what is ultimately happening is these people are standing up and going, no more. In the example of Trump, we don't want an insider anymore. Yeah, he doesn't seem to be the greatest guy. Yeah, he's been bankrupt a whole bunch of times, but you know what? He's not part of the Clinton dynasty. He's not part of the Bush dynasty. He's not part of the Washington dynasty. So screw you. In the case of Brexit, a similar thing. We're not going to be told what to do by a super government that sits 1,000 miles away in another city. So we're going to do our own thing. Thanks very much. And this is us sort of standing up for our rights. So where do you think the line is there on populism, the bad, and populism actually civil society standing up and saying, hey, enough now, we're taking control?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting point, because to me, populism is more marketing kind of based. And you get populism on the left and populism on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, the way society has changed now, where you've got social media, which is a fantastic tool or the worst tool in the world, whichever way you look at it,
Yeah.
and traditional forms of marketing coming into political play now, you have to take a populist approach which appeals to the majority. Some people are not going to like it, but because it's populist, the majority that you want will relate to it. People have become pretty shallow when it comes to political ideals, and they don't scratch deeper than the surface. So populism sits right on the top of the surface there, and appeals to my easiest sense, or my easiest or my top ideology as a member of the public. And if you can appeal to my top ideology and show that it's being threatened by someone else, and that I have the solution, although it might be a populist approach, I'm going to go for it. I won't think further than that, because it appeals directly to me instantly. So populism is necessary, I think, but it can lead to very, very poor decision making when it comes to voters actually deciding who to vote for.
Yeah, I mean, so far populism has gone largely right. It's weird. Maduro is a socialist dictator, but he's not a populist. They never say, "Oh, he's a populist." He is.
Although Chavez was a populist, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the essence of populism, right? Chavez and Maduro and all these leftist socialists on the left. But when Salvini wins Italy, oh, he's a populist. And it appears that the word is used to describe a democratic process that people don't like. Blue check box on Twitter, if they don't like it, but it's democratic, they can't call it like a dictatorship. So oh, well, it's just populist. The problem is, the populist Salvini has 65% approval, Macron has less than 20%. And Macron was a shining light of centrism, and people are trying to get him out because he wants to increase the price of diesel due to the EU and climate change. But what people are worried about right now is...
I hope that was caught on camera, by the way.
What?
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change. I mean, to assume that you increase the price of diesel to fight climate change is fucking retarded.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I agree with you.
It really is. For 30 years, the French people, I mean, my family lives there. For 30 years, the state has put increases on petrol for the longest time to curb lead and shit like that. And they say, good alternative is diesel. So for 30 years, people have been buying diesel cars by the millions, and then now there's a sudden switch. Oh no, actually diesel's the worst, so now we're going to increase diesel dramatically. You're like, well, fuck me.
Because diesel was never the best, because the car companies were lying about the emissions.
Exactly. But now, for 30 years, you've been telling me bullshit. You've been lying to me. So I invested hundreds of thousands of euros in cars, for 30 years. And now you turn around and say, oh, actually, we just lied. But don't worry, we'll just increase the price of diesel so now you can go back to petrol. And people are like, no, fuck you. Enough of this. I don't know what my point is.
Well, I think you've made a good point about populism, and that
Right.
when there is a breaking point in every society. We were talking about it before the show. I don't think, for example, diesel is the breaking point in South Africa. It was in France, and in immigration, for example, is argued as the breaking point for Brexit. There's several factors to Trump, but in South Africa, what do you think are the breaking points for South Africans and their civil society rise? What do you think are the things that would make people go, you know what, I'm done? I mean, we've had a lot of problems in South Africa. We've had a president who stole the country blind for 10 years. We've got a political party who's stolen the country blind for 25 years. And before that, a political party who stole the country blind for 50 years. So we've had major issues. A rise of civil society actually caused the end of that previous government, that and sanctions. So what do you think is the thing that finally makes people go, you know what, actually, I'm not just going to accept it anymore. I'm not just going to go to the polls and keep voting for that stupid wagon wheel. I'm done.
I think there might be several answers to that question. Because we're such a diverse society, there might be different aspects which appeal to different sectors.
Yeah.
I think for the middle class, it's without a doubt taxes. There's no doubt about that. I think we're already a heavily taxed nation, and the solution to the government's problem seems to be add more taxes here, add more taxes there. We're in a state that's running out of money rapidly. The middle class is being burdened with totally unnecessary taxes. We've seen new taxes coming in now, the carbon tax, and that's already put a 10 cents increase on diesel, funny enough. And there's got to come a point where businesses or big business owners or even individuals are going to say, enough. We recently saw Helen Zille rightfully saying the only thing that's going to solve the problems in this country.
Boycott.
Yeah.
Just on that quickly, let's get back to some of the other solutions, but you've spoken about the middle class. My only problem is when you mention business, because in my opinion, business is completely cowardly. Big business, certainly. Small businesses, we're going to have someone on the show next week, and that's an entirely different space, the small and medium business space. But big business just doesn't have any balls. And so when taxes get too much, all that'll happen is they'll stop renting their building in Sandton for 40 million a month, and they'll just go rent a building in Mauritius for, I don't know, 80 million rupees or whatever a month. So I don't see business necessarily rising up, but the individual. The question is if the individual within the middle class has enough institutional power. Many people argued against Helen Zille's tax revolt, saying, well, I pay PAYE. My HR department takes it off my salary before it hits my account. So even if I wanted to, I can't really do this. So I think the middle class uprising is unlikely. I think the way we see the middle class uprising is that they immigrate.
Absolutely, yeah, they do.
I think that's the best example of a real tax revolt. They turn around and go, "Screw you!" I mean, earlier this week, Ramon tweeted out about it. Quite a popular tweet in the end from our account, with regards to South Africa wanting to bill foreign expats tax. So if you in the UK and you earn a salary in the UK and you live there. But you hold a South African passport and you have a tax number, I would imagine, they want to say, well, you earned £100,000 this year, and therefore you are going to pay us 30 or 40% of your
anything over
income.
R1 million, 45%.
Well, good luck collecting it.
Yeah, good luck collecting it. But secondly, what is the point of being a South African citizen then?
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
just give up your passport. That's exactly what will happen.
Give it up totally. You're already there. You're already halfway. If you're in England, I'm sorry if you live there. It's a terrible place.
Mad Island.
Yeah, a nation of shopkeepers, as my hero once said.
You know what's hilarious about this is the Frenchmen criticizing the British. But anyway,
they killed the aristocracy at the Battle of Agincourt, so fuck them. But I mean, you already live in Dubai. You've been living there for 5 years. You're, a camel trainer. You make $20,000 a month because camel training is really popular. And then the government says, okay, cool. Anything over R1 million a year, we're going to tax you 45%. For fucking what? You don't use the roads. You don't use any services in South Africa. It is just theft.
Absolutely.
Utter theft. And to assume that expats will approve of this in any way rather than just sell the passport to go get fucked.
Well, that's exactly what will happen. If you're not getting any benefit for your tax, why pay for it? Why actually contribute? Which brings us right back to the original question there. The middle class receives very little benefit for their tax contributions. So why would they pay it? Or why do they continue to pay it? It's the threat of prosecution for not paying tax. That's the only thing that keeps the tax system going. But a tax revolt, I spoke about this last week, was the tax revolt will start at municipal level. You will stop paying your rates and taxes, first of all, because they're the easiest taxes to stop.
But that's already happening.
Exactly.
144 billion rand outstanding.
There's no consequence to that either.
Well, there was for me.
Yeah.
I paid late once and they wanted to cut me off.
Because you're an individual. So if your whole community stopped paying, what could they do? And
but
we've seen that in Soweto.
White people in the suburbs, Rob. We can't even agree on what colour
what
colour the speed bump must be.
No, totally. But we will get to that breaking point, which is what we're talking about. Yeah. That breaking point will come. We all sort of go, enough. If I'm tired of eating cake,
just stop paying.
Let's go. Stop paying. Yeah, and it's got to be a mass.
Well,
movement.
the middle class also does this in some other ways. They, you talk rates and taxes, but a lot of people are putting in solar who can afford it. Solar, water systems into their houses, boreholes, etc., and it's just a matter of time before it becomes cost effective to go completely off the grid.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about just normal rates and taxes in terms of people to pick up your garbage and whatever they're meant to do with your other rates and taxes, fund the city. Well, good luck on them doing anything to you. They've got to sue you, right? But they've got to sue thousands or tens of thousands. So perhaps that's the breaking point for the middle class. That's about 11, 12 million people in this country. Okay, what about, it's not really the lower class, but it's the lower to middle class, I would guess. Yeah, I don't mean it in a derogatory sense.
Working class is fine.
Yeah, the working class.
Blue collar.
Yeah, whatever doesn't.
Whatever
fuck
catchphrase
that,
is.
man. This is a renegade report. We're not here to not
it's true.
offend people.
They're working
Get
class.
fucked.
Why are you trying to?
If you're upset by lower class, then fucking be upset. The point is the people who live in greater poverty, the people who are reliant on things like social grants in their community. Not all of them are. A lot of these people are working, but in the families, certainly. A lot of kids are funded through child support grants. We've got elderly people on pensions. That's how they get by. Is that the breaking point? If that system fails?
I definitely think so. That's actually a very, very, very good point. Where we have almost 19 million people on social grants, or 19 million social grants being issued every month. The reason
is it up to 19 million?
Almost 19 million.
Wow, we were at 17 million a couple of years ago.
Almost 19 million. It's madness. When you have that many people receiving social grants, and you have an issue which we saw recently with the SASSA debacle, where the payments were 1 week late. The government panicked. There was absolute panic there. There's going to be an uprising immediately from 19 million receivers of social grants. Although some people might receive two, so it's probably about 13 million that actually receive them. But that's a significant number of people who could.
Well,
who
it's
could
13
take
million
action.
you receive, maybe, roughly, but it's often entire families who supported on one person's pension or one person's grant
That's right.
for whatever reason, because people are living hand to mouth.
But hold on. The working class or the poor, whatever the fuck you want to call them, they're really far more democratic than us in terms of protest.
Yes, they are.
There's how many 1,000 protests a year these days? It's up 300% in the past 10 years. That's a form of democratic action. I know maybe we don't like the fact that they burn down clinics or something. Like, I think they should burn down mayors' houses first. I mean, the clinic is useful, right? I mean,
Why don't they?
why don't they? Except for Des Van Rooyen, his house got burnt down. More of that, please. But
We are not advocating violence, just putting it out there.
just damage to state property. The ANC did that for 60 years and they were considered heroes, so we can do the same. But they are far more democratic than us middle class.
I think you
people.
might be the first political prisoner in the post sort of
I'm
apartheid
not
era.
advocating for violence. You can't be violent against
Robin Island
bricks.
is all yours.
You can't be violent against bricks. They're not animate objects. But the working class are already a lot more democratic, and they want accountability far more than us, because they actually rely on the state far more than us as well.
Absolutely.
We sort of get fleeced, right? The state just steals from us, and we're like, okay, fine. It's what is that term? It's like an expense of just living here. What is the term? The cost
An
of
investment
doing,
cost
the cost
or-
of doing
or a-
business.
yeah.
As they say, if you pay a bribe, that's the cost of doing business. Just
Yeah.
add it to the balance sheet.
Yes.
That's what the middle class does. But the working class or the poor, they like protest and they strike and they do all sorts of things. That's a lot more democratic accountability. They took down the Northwest Premier, for God's sake, Supra, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a mayor of a major city like resign over protest action. But in the rural areas, it happens all the time.
Absolutely. I think it's why don't the middle class protest would probably be a good question.
Because
They do look ridiculous when they try. I mean, every time the DA puts together one of those marches and then they try to get because the DA is always trying to pretend like everyone's the same. They also go down the equality bent. So they try to get some white person from Parkhurst to toy in the front of the march. And it always looks absolutely, Jenny Chris Williams toying in the front of a march is kind of the image
Where
you
the
need to think
sandwiches?
of. Yeah.
We're going on a picnic.
and where's my my dill on the sandwiches?
The domestic carrying the backpack next to her just to feed her sparkling water on the march.
Yeah, I think, South Africa grew through an incredibly difficult time in its history through protest. Those are the people we're talking about. These are people who if they didn't, their parents were part of protest. There was these sort of two sides. It was the government, and then it was protesters, and we obviously have many historical times in our history that we even remember to today. Sharpeville in 1976, and all of these things, which are seminal events in the country, and protests. So I think that's almost in the DNA of these populations. The downtrodden in South Africa rise up more commonly than the sort of middle class. The middle class's greatest claim to fame from apartheid is that they voted in the referendum to get rid of apartheid. But it's not, and a lot of people were involved in some way in helping, but they generally were not on the front lines, with throwing stones at police Caspers.
No, they weren't, and that's also another good point. Is that if I think back to my childhood, living in the apartheid era, I was completely unaware of what was going on. Completely unaware, because we lived in a sheltered environment, sheltered in your suburbs. And oddly enough, I grew up in Parkhurst. But
I'm so sorry. It's worse now, though. They have artisan food. It's just horrific.
Absolutely, no. It was a different suburb when I was a kid, because I was there. No, I'm joking. But we lived in a sheltered life, and although protesting and a lot of protest action was happening, I didn't know it was happening. I didn't know it was happening at all. And I think most of the people or white middle class who've grown up today are still unaware. We lived under an oppressive government, and we became used to the idea that you don't question your government, you don't protest. The government takes control, and the government is
knows
there for
best.
You. Government knows best.
Yeah.
And that's why, in my opinion, that we don't protest. Whereas people who lived outside of that environment did grow up, as you say, in the protest environment, and they still continue to do that because it is effective. It gets the powers that be to notice, wow, there's 10,000 people in the street knocking on my door. We're just 10 here, they're 10,000. We better do something to placate the masses. But it doesn't happen.
Basically, middle class, be more working class in your attitude towards democracy. But I actually want to talk to you. So you were the co-founder of one of the biggest civil society organizations, OUTA, right? So we had Wayne Duvenage on here, and he seems okay.
Pleasant guy.
Made sense when we spoke to him. But you and a few others left OUTA quite a few years ago, and then you decided to do something else for more participatory democracy. So what made e-tolls like the thing, that sort of broke the camel's back? Because that was the middle classes like camel's back.
Yeah, it was the first tax revolt.
It was the first one, but on a real visceral level. I remember being furious. I used to listen to 702 like a moron. Now I don't anymore. But I was like, oh, e-tolls, it's disgusting. We shouldn't pay it, whatever. And then it happened. It finally came into effect after 5 years of threats. And then no one gives a shit anymore.
Yeah.
So what made e-tolls at the time when you formed it or were part of the formation, what made e-tolls like the straw?
I think it was exactly that. It was sort of the final straw. The fight against e-tolls was never really a fight against road taxes. It was a weapon that civil society had finally been handed to win a much bigger fight, and that fight was a fight against a government who sort of lost touch with the people, wasn't listening to the will of the people anymore, and it was an easy fight because you could still use the road and just not pay. And that was the whole thing. So I started a movement before OUTA. It was called Proudly E-Tag Free. And the idea there was don't get an E-tag because the system is designed to work on an electronic level.
That's the buy-in.
Exactly, yeah. So once you got an E-tag, you were registered and money came off your account automatically and so on and so on. And I realized that if you didn't get an E-tag, you could quite easily overburden the system with manual administration. So that whole movement took off like absolute wildfire. It was a ground level up.
Yeah, a lot of bumper
movement.
stickers on cars at
A
the
lot
time.
of bumper stickers
I
on
remember.
cars, bridges on banners, teams running across handing stuff out.
It's an interesting point you raise because let's say we had a relatively efficient government. Let's say we had Helen Zille's capable state, which, yeah, whatever. But let's say we had that. And so the government kind of delivered on what they said they were going to do. People generally felt that the government was involved in a positive aspect of their life rather than mostly negative. We hardly ever heard of politicians scandal-free for the most part. Sometimes they cheat on their wives or something like that. And then I imagine e-tolls would have happened and no one would have cared because people would have gone, well, they built some new roads. They built one extra lane and they kind of renovated the road. And now the concrete barrier that I hit when I lose control in the rain, is better than going into oncoming traffic, I suppose. So I only die. And yeah, I'm going to pay for that. The point's been made by a lot of people that this happens all over the world. If you drive into the middle of Sydney, for example, you cannot drive into the middle of Sydney without an e-tag. If you do drive into the middle of Sydney without an e-tag, you will be broke by the time you drive out because the penalties for not having a tag are so high. So this is not uncommon worldwide. The company that they're using from Austria is in many countries for that exact reason. People generally tend to go, all right, well, the government provided the roads need to be paid for and renovated every now and again, etc. So it really is that the government was so useless, so hated, so ineffective by the time e-tolls came in that people were like, look, this is at least something I can latch onto. Is that
That's exactly
fair estimation of what took place?
That's exactly it. I truly, to this day, do not believe it was anything to do with, it's going to cost me 2,000 Rand a month extra. Because if you look at the facts of e-tolls, it's capped at 260 Rand a month for anyone.
Yeah.
And so it's exactly as...
So 520 Rand, the average middle-class person is buying double that in coffee probably a month.
Precisely. So the fight was never against the financial burden that civil society was going to face. It was simply that we'd had enough of everything else that was going on, and this was an easy way to say, up yours, government. Straight and easy as that. And it was an easy fight. It was just pretty basic.
And it worked really well. And OUTA worked really well. And OUTA was born, and it's still very large. It gets a lot of donations every month. So we had Wayne in here, and nice guy. But then we spoke about the greater political ideology of the ANC and what they do, how they infiltrate organizations for resources and influence, and
the NDR.
Right. Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's the greater ideology. Do you have to be so blunt?
I always. You know me.
Our listeners know.
Heart on the sleeve, man.
We are dog whistling to white supremacists. They know what we're saying. Anyway.
Sometimes you have to remind them.
Sometimes, yes. White supremacists not the brightest. So
can you not talk about young white supremacists so much with young Mark in the studio, please? Right. Young Mark not on camera, but young Mark's in the studio. That's how you're getting the video feed.
Yeah. We will talk about young Mike in a moment. So OUTA brings in Makosi Khoza. He was mayor of some shithole town somewhere. And she's very brave because she doesn't like Zuma. Like 30 million other people in this country who don't like Zuma. But anyway, Makosi Khoza is really brave. She doesn't like beer and black men together because it's racist. And she's head of campaigns or something, director at OUTA. And we mentioned to him, like, this is a bad idea because the NDR, she's going to come in, infiltrate, take over, put her people in positions of influence in the organization, and it's just all those lovely donations to OUTA are going to go straight back to the fucking ANC.
Or towards ANC ideology.
Right. And he's like, nah, that's all nonsense.
No.
And now I thought, okay, OUTA is not something I would give my money to. So, I mean, as someone who's been in civil society for a very long time, and who've co-founded OUTA and various other things. I mean, this is a real threat, right? The NDR is a real threat to civil society because you can be in the ANC and be against e-tolls.
Yes.
Like the Gauteng ANCs are against e-tolls.
Yeah.
But the national one told them, no, e-tolls will stay. So, I mean, it's not difficult to be against corruption and against e-tolls, right? And still be within the ANC. But it's a real threat. The existential threat of the ANC is that they infiltrate you and take all your shit, at the end of the day. So as someone who's worked in civil society for a long time, have you seen that as a real threat, or is it a fairly new phenomenon?
I think it's a definite threat. And I'll take it out of the civil society environment to have a look at in the organisation I'm in now, which is COPE. When COPE broke away from the ANC, there was a definite plan from the ANC, which was well funded, to actually get into the insides of COPE and destroy it from within. And civil society definitely, without a doubt, faces the same threat.
It's interesting you say that, just on a tangent quickly, because a lot of people have supposition that the same is happening within the DA, that there are people in the DA who speak exactly like people in the ANC do, hold very similar ideas, push those ideas and those ideologies. So it's just interesting that there's a track record. And so that doesn't seem to be as much of a conspiracy theory.
No. Well, I don't think it's even a conspiracy theory. I think it's fact. It definitely does exist. When we first started this conversation, I also said that to get into an organization or into government, you've got to change it from the inside, because you can't change anything from the outside. And the same applies there. If you want to destroy an organization, the easiest way is from the inside out.
My father often used to say to me, you can't change City Hall until you're mayor. And so it's true. That's the best way to go about it.
It's a strong system, and it's designed to protect it. It expects attacks from the outside, and it responds in an appropriate way. But you place someone on the inside and you break just one wheel and the whole system collapses. So it's... Yeah, where were we going with that?
Oh, no, I was just talking about the NDR as being existential threat to civil society. So you've been involved in various different things, from probably ETAG to OUTA, now to, what's it called?
Dear South Africa.
Dear South Africa, which is a participatory democratic platform. I mean, have you come up, against resistance from...
Without a doubt.
From people that you thought, okay, they want to be my friend, but they look a bit dodgy, and I'm worried about what they want to do with my institutional platform. I mean, can you give a few examples or the methods they use or things like that?
Definitely. Well, the whole Dear South Africa thing started in Cape Town, actually. It was a platform called Dear Cape Town. And it was born from the city of Cape Town wanting to introduce the drought charges on water. And they invited public comment, as you have to do. But they didn't make it easy enough for people to participate and submit their comments. There were a few petitions floating around, but petitions are completely ineffective. So I opened up that platform, which allows people to make a comment, and it sends an email directly to the city, and that's the city counts it as an official submission, which they have to, by law, acknowledge and consider in the decision-making process. So what happened there is we opened up the platform, and the city received 57,000 public comments from the public, obviously, and they looked at this and they were overwhelmed, because they're used to receiving about 200 to 500 at the most, and they eventually dropped it, and then dropped the whole drought charge because they couldn't deal with the amount of comments coming through, so they reformed it into something else, called it a different kind of charge, and reinstated it. Well, we picked it up again, opened up another public platform, and they received 61,000 comments from the public. But there again, we started getting, because we had little public groups all over the place promoting it on social media and so on, and every now and then you'd get an anonymous person who gives you information from the city and says, here, I've got some inside info, this is how it happens, this is what you need to do, you need to go this route. And so you're all keen and eager at the beginning, you take their advice and you go, and you hit a brick wall, and suddenly the city blocks that route, because it's almost like they knew that you were coming. And on social media, it's extremely easy to have infiltrators and get them, and you create a fake profile, and you can influence the whole conversation around a topic. So definitely, the infiltration by your opponent is an obvious task. What do we call them? Agent provocateurs, or
use the example of the DA.
Yeah.
So, like, we bang on about the NDR and the ANC, but obviously the DA participates in it as well.
Well, definitely do. They follow a lot of the same sort of ideology, and dealing.
That's not even ANC light. That's like ANC junior at this stage.
It's an ANC offshoot. Oh, did I say that? Oh, wait, this is a Renegade Report.
That's the most polite thing we've said on this whole podcast.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like something like OUTA, you left a few years ago. I mean, do you think that thing like will exist in 5 years in any meaningful way?
Honestly, I don't think so. You measure a civil society organization by its impact on society, and when you have a corporate mindset within a civil society organization, it's a recipe for disaster, because you base your success on growth on the internal organization. So, we're getting this much more money every month. Our staff has grown by this much. We're taking on this many more projects. But civil society needs to be measured on the impact you're having. So, although your organization is growing, it's getting fat, just like our government is doing the same thing. But you're having a less and less and less impact on what you're supposed to be doing.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of death, really, because what's happening in an organization like that is you get more and more money, but unless you're willing to fight the NDR, which is essentially the map or plan to get to socialism within South Africa, and unless you fight that tooth and nail, we will get there all very close. That is proven where that leads everywhere in the world, many times over. And so that money that comes in every month will dry up very quickly the closer you get to that end goal. So unless you're willing to really fight that, you're doomed, because those funders are going to disappear. They're either going to leave the country, or they're not going to have any income to pay for you anymore.
Absolutely.
I still think you're looking at this at a far more sophisticated level than necessary. It's, for me, like the Institute of Race Relations, right? It's the most influential think tank probably in Africa by a long shot. They don't. I've seen the financials. I'm a member, so they send the financials, because as a think tank, that's what you do. They don't make. They run their place on R1 million a month, right? And a lot of it is crowdfunding. They've got 6,000 or 7,000 people that give 50 or 100 rand a month. So all their funding has dried up because they don't want to do BEE in the think tank. So, and that's how they get to you. They say, civil society, are you BEE compliant? Oh, if you're not, then, FNB can't support you because we only support BEE funded things by the state. So that's how the NDR works as well. They infiltrate the way you fund it. They infiltrate who you hire. They infiltrate and determine and influence many, many things. It's not just about taking someone on the board who is an ANC person. It's about the regulatory framework they put around you that just constrains you completely.
Totally agree.
And you cannot fight that through a corporate mindset.
No, you cannot. Absolutely not, because the corporate mindset loves the hierarchical structure, which is very, very rigid, and it requires strong regulation and strong rules and everything else to follow. Whereas civil activism, you can't have a hierarchical structure. And it's more of a creative environment where I see something now and I need to come up with a solution, and I find those ways, and I need to break rules in order to get there. And when you have that corporate mindset, you can't break the rules. And as you get more and more people in who follow the NDR, you just instill more and more stronger framework, and it destroys any civil society organization. And the interesting thing is, you can't have BEE structures and so on in a civil society organization. You cannot, because then you're not actually getting the right person for the job.
Well, that's just general life.
You're taking the populist approach again, which destroys any movement, especially in civil society.
But
it needs to be strong and focused.
But you cannot use the rules of the state to fight the state.
No, you can't. Absolutely.
You can't use the imposed laws on you. You have to break those laws. I'm not talking about criminal law. I'm just talking about regulatory law.
It's bigger than that. You can't socially engineer civil society. That's the whole point. Every time you try to socially engineer civil society, it ends up badly. This is once again proven. Social engineering is bad, and it is unnatural. Most importantly, so when you try to implement it, it just inevitably destroys whatever it's applied to. So
Yeah.
civil society, you try to social engineer the race of people who are representing the group or whatever it is. That just isn't going to work out because that group likely didn't come together based on that particular social engineering factor.
No, true. And they sort of follow one ideology, which you can't have that in a civil society movement either, because it's such a dynamic environment that there are different influences at different moments. And the ideal situation within a civil society movement or even a political party is to have a difference of opinion. So you can, from people who have differing opinions, you can formulate a proper solution or an example. If you have sort of totalitarian mindset, and it happens in civil society where you have one personality who dominates everything and exactly.
What was that?
George Soros.
Especially if he's a major funder, well, then you got a problem because it's
Can't believe you mentioned that on the podcast.
But here's the thing with people like civil society, like Soros is seen as a philanthropist, right? And it's his money; he should be able to do with it how he wants. What I'm concerned about is a very corporate structure. He funds 146 different institutions in this country, anywhere from equal education to Africa Check to everything. These are all actually like sort of little businesses, right? They also run, like, they got boards and shit like that for the most part. But the problem is that there's no skin in the game for these people, that they don't have a mandate from the public to do something, whereas AfriForum does. Because they get 200,000 people giving them 10 or 50 rand a month.
Yeah, and those people will stop giving them money if they don't do their bidding, essentially.
Exactly.
Correct.
Like, I'm worried about the skin in the game aspect. So Soros gets where he is because he's just so fabulously wealthy. But and so are the Koch brothers on the other side, right? And they both can do what they want. They do what they want to do with their money. I'm not going to tell them what to do. But in the long term, that is not going to work out well.
No.
Because I think AfriForum will be here in 100 years. I don't know if equal education will.
I totally agree. And then,
well, equal education will have achieved their goal in about 10 or 20 years' time, because all schooling will be absolutely terrible and equal.
That's an interesting point where
we're already getting there. Most public
equality
schooling
brings
is
you down.
completely terrible and equal.
Equality brings down, it never sort of raises up.
Well, it doesn't
You've got
allow you
take
to
away
raise up, because the bottom line is it will not allow a level above, ever.
Yeah.
Everything has to be down at it can be all at the top level, but that's not possible, because that's not the natural order of things, either biologically, socially, anything.
I had a greater point, though.
Yes.
You're talking about biology and shit like that.
No, I'm talking about broader concepts, but carry on.
Yeah, so the big problem, I think, with civil society generally is funding, right? So you need a movement in like OUTA, where they say, we're fighting for your rights, give us 50 rand a month. And that sort of works well. You have done multiple different things in civil society. Is funding an issue ever? Or do you find a way to tap into people's intuition that says, this is actually really wrong, I'm going to fight for it?
Well, people latch onto a cause from an emotional level rather than a logical level most of the time. So you just got to find that emotional hook and present it in a way that you've got to identify your potential market's top value and show that this issue in civil society is threatening their top value. People will do anything to defend their top value. And their top value differs depending on where you are on the social ladder. For me, it might be good education for my kids. If that's under threat, I'm going to defend that. And if you present me a solution that defends that top value, I will commit to it.
So you're creating
for
the
an
lines
emotional level.
in the sand that won't be crossed.
Exactly. So throughout different sectors of society, you've got to find what it was. In OUTA and ETOLs, it was pretty simple. People were faced with a threatening summons from SANRAL. I haven't paid ETOLs. I've got a 10,000 rand outstanding bill. SANRAL's threatened to issue summons. Oh, okay. So all we did at OUTA was say, well, if you issued with a summons and you're a contributing member of OUTA, we'll defend it on your behalf. Boom. Instant 4,000 members a month coming and paying whatever they were paying. But that in itself is unsustainable, because should that threat disappear, you're going to lose all your funding
Yeah.
straight away.
Mm.
So at some point, you've got to switch it over to say, well, actually, it's you paying for a greater cause here, and this is the greater cause. And that becomes very difficult because fighting corruption, how do you get people to contribute towards an organization when your sole focus is fighting corruption? Because it means a different thing to you, it means a different thing to you, and a different thing to me. And it's so far removed from that top value that I think, it's such a big problem. Giving money, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. So what the IRR has done is they take each individual. I mean, you see what goes on Facebook. Every topic that they talk about has a call to action there, a call for funding. That's the right approach, because they're tackling many different issues and appealing to many different markets, but they identify the emotional hook and say, this is the issue at hand. If it appeals to you, why not help us fight it?
Yeah.
I think that's to me where OUTA's gone wrong. It wasn't an argument that we had quite often when I was still there. Is that what are people contributing to, and you can't. What are we selling at the end of the day? If you take it into pure marketing terms and commercial terms, what is OUTA selling? Nothing. You can't say they're selling hope. Because what is hope? Really, come on.
You're not Barack Obama.
No, exactly. We're selling hope. Yeah, great. Why do I have to pay for hope? That's a good thing. And the question that I always put out was, why would I give an organization money when a political party can do exactly what you're doing but for free? And the answer to that question shows where civil society's value proposition is. If you can't answer that question, then you're dead in the water.
I think in the South African context, we want civil society organizations to really be taking on that political party. So we want someone to be standing up to the government. As I said, people going about their daily jobs, lives, not interested. They're not really keen on going to Parliament and making noise. They're not really. I mean, you've done very good stuff with submissions, for example, and getting people involved. But even the EWC side of the argument, there was 900,000 odd submissions, I think it was on that.
Somewhere close.
700. Yeah.
Okay, it was a lot.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Stop spreading fake news.
And so, that's good. That's good. But there are far more landowners in this country, or far more people who that EWC will affect. Tribal lands, as an example, would affect tens of millions. People who actually own homes is far more than 700,000 or 900,000 people. So the number of submissions should have been far greater. I think people go, all right, I want an OUTA or a Dear South Africa or whatever it is. I want that organization to be the noisemaker. I want them to, Parliament's busy going through their motions, and I want this organization to be the organization that sort of trips them up. And that's why people tend to support these things. The minute it becomes clear that either organization can't do that anymore, or they're in bed with the government, that's when the sort of it disappears. The support disappears.
Absolutely right.
That's a fair assessment?
Absolutely, it's a spot on assessment, and I think that's why AfriForum has been so successful in pretty much everything they do. Is because they take a stance and they stick with it. They stick with it. And they don't deviate left or right. They just go. This is where we want to go, and nothing's going to push us off the path. As soon as you start bowing down to whatever it is, public pressure, or you're too scared to offend people, or you want to please everyone, then again that goes towards the populism thing.
Well, then you become the DA.
Exactly.
What do you make of the? Public pressure is interesting in the age of social media, because I mean, I'm not sure we ever really knew what the public pressure was, in the sense that we've always relied on polling to some extent. We've never gone to every single member of the population and gone, what do you think on apartheid? What do you think about Jim Crow laws in the United States? What do you think about, these are not things that are done at an individual level. They poll 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever the number required to get a statistical value is. And then they say, all right, that's where the public perception is. But in the age of social media, now the public perception is driven by trends, what's trending on Twitter, what people are liking on Facebook, how many times did something get shared. And to me, that seems like it's a very false perception of the reality. People are making this mistake both ways. I mean, someone commented about how our YouTube channel had something, 400 or 500 subscribers a little while ago. It's just been started. But, and so therefore that's who listens to us.
Yeah.
300 racists apparently listen to us, right? But the actual numbers are tens of thousands. So that's the actual data. But because in the social media space, there's a number there, then someone runs with that, and that becomes the sort of the reality online, and then the reality online somehow gets interpreted into the real life space. We see this with political parties getting influenced all the time by social media narratives. We're hitting on the DA quite a lot here, but the DA does it all the time. Yeah. The Ashwin Willemse thing, they fell into that trap on social media. They fell into the trap on expropriation without compensation. They got a whole bunch of EFF bots, essentially, or even if they're not bots, they're people who clearly can't think for themselves. They just swarm them by going, oh, EWC, you don't want black people to have land, and you stole the land, and then they go, yeah. So we don't agree with the EWC, but we sort of do, from a position of we don't, right? It's why I have a lot of respect for COPE as an example, because COPE from the beginning has said no. And then when people said, but you're racist, they said no, right? And then when people said, but you don't want good things for black people, they said, no, we're still against EWC. All of your suppositions are wrong, but we're against the principle, and we'll explain why. And so social media is having an incredible effect on what people think public perception is, what people think civil society stands for.
Absolutely right. The trick with social media is to give it time, because it moves so quickly. I mean, the Twitter opinion and a trend can happen in the morning, and then it's gone by the afternoon. So if you are reactionary, and a lot of political parties and civil society movements are more reactionary than proactive, then you're going to be influenced by those immediate things that happen on social media. And that's where a lot of them do fall down and fall into those dangerous traps. And once you've fallen down that road, the stigma is attached to you, and you cannot shake it. So the trick is to just wait a while and see how it plays out. Just watch from the sidelines and let the other guys make fools of themselves, because they will, and they will. And then come up with a decent strategy to counteract it.
So you were civil society fighting the state for years and years and years, and now you sold out. Apparently many other black South Africans over the years, they sold out. You, not black, maybe you are, sorry. I don't want to misrace you. Is that a word?
Cameras here now.
They are they are cameras. I got proof now.
He might be transrace.
Transracial.
Transracial.
So you joined COPE.
Identified.
You're 1024th black.
Can I pose my question, please? Just because the camera's here, you don't need to act like it's a bloody service.
This is how I act all the time. Have you not listened to the podcast the last 150 episodes? Carry on.
So anyway, you've sold out. You've joined a political party, COPE, and you've been appointed Deputy Secretary General of COPE. I still have no idea what a General Secretary does at any fundamental level. I know it's like a manager, I suppose, of a party. So why are you joining people that you fought against? Not COPE particularly, politicians. Now.
Okay, well,
what's up with that?
I've always been against politicians. I've never trusted them, and I've been and started off as an anarchist at heart, and
a man after my own heart.
Yes. And until I realised that it was an ideology and unobtainable. And did you see the look he's giving me now?
Don't worry, you're 100% right. Please carry on.
Anyway, but then I graduated to being sort of libertarian at heart, and then I'm all for the notion that don't give me laws that tell me how to live my life. I'm all for laws that protect others from my actions, but I'm responsible enough to look after myself. I don't need laws that protect me from myself. That's just ridiculous. So again, I've always been against politicians and against political movements because I've seen it as a total farce. But being in civil society for 10 years, and especially from the ETOL saga and from OUTA and so on, I got to see the back end of how politics and political parties work. And I realized that you actually need a strong partnership between civil society and politics, and it's got to be based on trust. And if it's not based on trust, then obviously it'll fall apart. The political system and the governance system is very well protected from within. And I got to see the back end of all the political parties, and for me, COPE was one that had their feet on the ground more than any of the others. They're more of a civil activist movement than a political party, in the sense that they see themselves as one of the people and equal to the people, rather than trying to rule over them. It might be because they're smaller opposition.
Until they win power,
yeah. Yeah, until they win power. But we never know how the future is going to play out. But from dealing with them from a sort of the back end side point of view, and not from a member of the public point of view, that I was quite encouraged by what happened. And about 3 years ago, I was helping them with a couple of social strategies and marketing side and social media and so on. And I thought, wow, they've got a system of direct democracy, which allows any COPE member to vote directly for the leadership and recall that leadership. And none of the other parties have that in place. You can elect for the NEC, but the NEC sort of decides
all the
who
federal
the leadership
council
is.
or the Politburo or whatever.
Or whatever it is, yeah. Or the FedEx or whatever else. I had to bring that in. But COPE's places the ultimate power with their members. And it's a policy that they want to bring to national government as well, where civil society and people have the ultimate power to elect their leaders directly and to recall them should they not be performing. And that really appealed to me as a civil activist. I thought, wow, that actually shifts the concentration of power from the top to the grassroots level. I thought I could get involved with a party like that and actually make a difference from grassroots up. So I became a member of COPE, and after not voting since I think
for forever,
94 was the last time I voted, because I just lost track. I thought, okay, now I'm actually going to dive in head first, and I became a member, started interacting with the leadership on a more personal level, and when the elections came up, I was convinced to put my application in to become Deputy General Secretary, and I got elected. It was a shocker for me. I was, what? Okay, here I am. And what do I do from now on?
No, it's rare.
And you've grown the Gwede Mantashe beard as well. I mean, that's what's impressive. I think it's dedication to the cause, really.
But it's quite rare for a relatively new member to become
absolutely
within a leadership role within a few short years or months or however long it's been. So we had Mr. Lekota on here last year, and I really like him. I think he's a great guy, affable, smart, knowledgeable.
Part of the history.
Yeah. Good history, but consensus seeking, hold on. 2001 Mbekiite to the core. If the government can do something better, then we should do it better. He doesn't trust people with guns. He wants a better police force. He doesn't. Yeah, there's very, as a person, great in terms of policies and ideas about society. Really like 1990s neoliberal thing, and that's fine to a large degree. But do you think? I mean, are you infiltrating it from within and changing it like the ANC does to everything else? Like, are you trying to do that? Because it's only, as you said, it's the party with direct democracy that the other parties don't have. So, I mean, what are the long-term goals for COPE? I mean, how are the prospects for this election looking? And hopefully, if you do get some support, how is that going to manifest later on?
Well, the prospects are looking good. I'm sure you've seen how more popular it has become, and COPE appeals to, I'd like to say, more intelligent crowd. Well, maybe not more intelligent, but more of a critical thinker. Whereas people are now questioning the DA. So you have your DA voters who are going, oh, something's not right here. What are the other options? They are now looking at COPE, and the same is happening from the ANC side and from, I don't think it's happening from the EFF side, but are they critical thinkers at all? But we're definitely attracting that sort of critical thinker market. It's even libertarians are kind of going, there's some good hope here. There's something going on there.
I think, and I alluded to it earlier, I think what is really fresh about the I'm hating that word, but what's really fresh about COPE at the moment in our political landscape is sticking to principle, and being willing to go, this is where we stand on a topic. We're going to stay with it. It's our position.
Yes.
If you don't like it, okay. We're not trying to be the broad church. We're not trying to target the sort of majority of voters we think will only vote if we think a certain way or we stand with a certain position. It's that social media influence. It's that misunderstanding of where the populace is, what's important to them. It's ignoring IRR polls, which say things like race are not important to people. Exactly. Things like BE is not important to people. A lot of these things that the political parties push are not actually what matters. And so being willing to stand on principle, I think has got you a lot of support. I am hopeful, like Ramon says, I am hopeful that there is more of a mood to understand that people should be left to be more free and less controlled, and that in a utopia, yes, a government would manage everything brilliantly and all our lives would be great. But the reality is that doesn't happen, because humans are fallible and humans run governments. And the more power you give them, generally the more fallible they become. So I hope there's a move towards less control and less attempt to get control. But the truth is I don't think COPE's going to win the next election.
No, of course not.
And so good, at least we've got a politician who's not being like unrealistic and doing that whole thing. No, we believe we can win. So you're not going to win the next election. And I think it's good to have a party like COPE in government saying things like, we fundamentally disagree with you on these positions and we're not moving, whether you tell us it's unpopular or not.
Yeah, well, look, COPE has no ambitions to win. We do have ambitions to win one day, but we are realistic and we know we're not going to win these elections. If you think anybody other than the ANC is going to win it, you're on a different planet. Quite honestly. So the idea is to grow the presence and the number of seats in Parliament, so you can have a greater influence in the decision-making process and hopefully influence politics again from the inside and influence government to make the right decisions in the best interests of society as a whole, whichever society that might be, because different needs for different people. It's quite an interesting situation, because we do attract a very, very different crowd, and sticking to our guns on certain issues, one being BEE and the other one most definitely land expropriation without compensation, has hugely benefited us. There's no confusion as to where COPE's stance is. Whereas nobody really knows where the DA stands on it. Nobody really knows where the ANC stands.
I know what their policy statement says, but I also know what people in Parliament have then said and what other people have tweeted. So the problem is, and all of those things conflict each other. So that's the issue. And
the popular stuff burns off very quickly. And the closer you come to elections, you'll see people start using their heads rather than their hearts. And right now, people are saying, but look, OUTA's a sellout, or COPE's a sellout, because they're going against the whole populist thing that people need land and so on. But we're gradually seeing those very same people, after we expose the the truth behind it all and give them the facts, they kind of wake up and go, okay, right, okay, I see your point of view now. You're actually right. This is a good policy. Let's get behind you on this. And working with civil society organisations like AfriForum and the IRR and others who hold solid positions and don't waver from those, only benefits us as well. I know it's a contentious point where everyone thinks COPE's extreme right now because we're siding with AfriForum. It's not the case at all.
You agree with one of their positions?
We agree with one of their positions, and it's a good position.
If AfriForum agrees that people should be given antibiotics when they have a bacterial infection, then they're right wing, and you would agree with that. That would be right. This is the problem, right?
Exactly.
You can't have any opinion. If any opinion is held by an organization you disagree with or you consider whatever, right, left, whatever, then immediately that opinion becomes toxified with that view. And so it's
but that's the thing with consensus-seeking behavior. There has to be consensus, but about a fucking solid principle. Not just consensus around bullshit, which is what a lot of people mistake consensus for. Italy is run by 5 political parties. 5. Through a populist alt-right government. Come on. No, they all agree immigration is bad for Italy. That's it. But they're Marxists and right-wingers and centrists and Berlusconi. I mean, come on. That's consensus seeking. It's all based on one thing, on one solid issue.
So what is that uniting thread? That's what you got to actually identify.
And if COPE is doing that with AfriForum and the IRR and who knows who else, I don't know the inner workings, but go ahead. Go to the Zulu King.
Totally. I think that's what you got to do. Is you got to find that golden thread, whether it's on the left or on the right. There's always some common thread that everyone can work towards, and we've got to find that and nurture it and grow it.
Absolutely.
But you need a political party to actually do that. Civil society is always going to be fragmented, no matter what you do, because it's based on identity politics. And identity politics is, I think we're in the age of identity politics. And it's a dangerous, dangerous situation because people don't go into the core issues. They just say, oh, great personality, I love what you're saying, let's go with you, without actually reading a manifesto or an ideology of a party. How many people know? How many people actually know about the NDR?
Very few.
Very few.
Very few. They think it's a conspiracy theory.
Totally.
It's like I'm like an anti-vaxxer of politics.
But it's there on the ANC's website. It's right that you can download
it's been
and
scrubbed
read it.
recently.
Yeah, oh, really?
Yeah, they've removed it, but they also admitted as much during the land expropriation hearings. If you watched them, and they said, it's an NDR plan. It's part of the NDR. Cool. We're going to have to call it.
Unfortunately, so yes.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. I see you haven't been on Twitter for a couple of years, so I'm not going to punt you on Twitter. But what would you like to punt?
Nothing, really. I just say, go with what your heart thinks is best for you. I don't want to say vote COPE because I think people should research all political parties. Research all political parties, but in depth. Read their manifestos, read their visions, read their ideologies, and vote for what suits you best. That's that thing. I know I'll vote COPE. So, but
right.
But,
you'll break your not voting
exactly
streak.
First time in this.
Ramon, do you want to? Okay.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, thank you. It was a real pleasure to learn more about civil society because people just think like NGOs and shit like that, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. And if you can marry political and civil, maybe it can work. I don't know. I have my doubts, but best of luck. Nevertheless, you stand for good principles, so I will support you on that.
Awesome, thank you, Ramon.
Awesome. You want to introduce everyone to young Mike? I don't know if young Mike can catch himself there on the camera.
Does young Mike?
Maybe if you do that.
If I do that, which way? Oh, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So if you watch the YouTube.
Right.
If you watch the YouTube feed, that's young Mike. So, Ramon?
Yeah, and Mike is responsible for filming today, and we hope to make this quite a permanent feature of the show going forward. So, Mike, thank you. It's weird. I feel like it's weird being on camera, but...
Yeah, the podcast will obviously carry on, those of you who download the podcast. We have made some changes to the RSS feed. So please, if you have been listening to the show, just make sure that it is still downloading and just recheck it every now and again over the next couple of months. Some changes happening sort of in the technical background, and we don't want to lose any of you.
And there's big changes coming
Yeah.
to the Renegade Report, but we're still finalizing. But I think everyone will be quite excited.
I agree. So, as always, for the moment, you can find us on Twitter at renegade_report, on Facebook, the page and the group, Ramon at Roman Kavanagh on Twitter, myself at Jonathan_Witt. And if you'd like to donate towards the show because you enjoy the content we are producing for you for free, you freeloaders, then please do visit our website. Yes? Not yet.
See, they can. It's not finished, but
Okay.
go look at it. Hopefully, it will be by the time this podcast comes out.
renegadereport.co.za/support us if you want to support us in any way, or you can just go to our PayPal link. We really appreciate any assistance we get. Thank you, as always, for listening and now for watching. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.